So people often ask me about the seven string. A lot of people sort of see me playing and want to make those kind of sounds and say, I just need a seven string, and that's gonna make it possible to make these sounds. Or they ask me, should I get a seven string? Now, there's a few different types of seven strings. Obviously, there's the kind of metal players that play the seven string, and the idea there is that the more strings the better, the deeper you can go the better. Your amp's got to go up to 11, whatever. So I'm not talking about that. There's a Russian seven string guitar which was tuned pretty much to an open G chord, like so, went from a low D and then G, D, G, D, something like that. I don't know. I don't know a lot about that. They sound quite nice, the music that I've heard. And there's also, in Latin music, you sometimes find seven string guitars, and they're using it a little bit more like I do, which is to just get some lower bass notes so you can get these sort of moving bass lines going on through the music, Obviously this is not a seven string guitar at the moment, but why did I get a seven string guitar? Well, it's kind of interesting because I was in my late 20s, I think, and I was traveling around the place, around the world, India and Australia and places like that, and I just felt it was time to, get out of my bedroom and go and see what else was going on in the world. And I took my trusty guitar, which was a Norman Reed guitar, and I loved that guitar so much. It was unfinished, it wasn't varnished, which made it a lot cheaper. Unfortunately, it also made it very susceptible to the weather, and I think it was in the Himalayas where it started to just warp and twist and get harder to play. But before that had happened, I was away, and my dad had phoned me up. I think I was in Australia at the time, and said, "Look, I really want to buy you a guitar." And I had this guitar that I love, but I was very much getting into all the kind of, the Michael Hedges, the percussive stuff, the top two-handed stuff. I don't really do a lot of that anymore, but it was new then, and I was exploring it. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to, have, like the metal players, have more strings, have more bass, and be able to do that? And I said, yeah, please, can I have a seven string guitar? But by the time that I got back to England and this seven string guitar had been built, my own guitar was completely unplayable. It was warped and twisted out of shape. As I say, somewhere in the Himalayas that finally put paid to it. It got too hot, cracked, and carnage. So I only had a seven string, and I have to tell you, it was a nightmare because you think I've got a six string guitar and I've got one extra string, so I'll just play the six strings and then gradually start to add the seventh string in, and I'll get the hang of it. But it doesn't work like that. The way the brain works, because sometimes you count down from the bass strings, or you feel down from the bass strings, sometimes you feel up from the treble strings. It's completely lost on the seven string for quite a long time. I got very frustrated just trying to use it, and eventually I had to get another six string guitar because the seven string guitar was too hard to play. I wrote a few things on it specifically for it, and I learned to play them, but I couldn't just turn up as a jam session with my seven string guitar. I'd be completely lost. So that's something to really bear in mind. If you think you're going to get a seven string guitar and just replace your six string guitar, I would think carefully about that, because it's quite a different thing. Now, a couple of things that really opened it up for me, the seven string guitar, was one piece that I wrote. I think it was called Nutty Cran. It was called Nutty Cran, and I actually wrote it on the sixth string, and it was I was in open G, so I had my A string down to G, and my top E string down to D. And normally you would have the bottom, the thickest string, down to D as well, but I didn't do that. I tuned it all the way down to B Yeah, and then I started doing this playing these harmonics, these sort of right-handed harmonics, and adding this kind of I'm playing sort of polyrhythm here. And then I get into something, and then the middle, and then the open G. So the whole thing was playable on the 6th string, and I just tuned the bass string all the way down to B, and that's how I recorded it for my first album, Acoustics. But then more recently I decided I wanted to make a sort of a live recording of it, and I thought I'd do it on my 7th string, and then I could tune the 7th string down to all the way down to B, which is pretty floppy, you know, but I did it, and on the 7th string obviously you can have a much thicker string. This is something I also want to talk about in another video soon, is string gauges for tuning, but I won't talk about that for now. But needless to say, I could have a much thicker B string. I think it was a 70, you know, so it doesn't flap around so much. And that allowed me to pick out some more notes. And I did a new version of the piece, but the piece is still playable on a 6th string, and that was how it was created. And then I kept my guitar, my 7th string guitar, in this sort of open G tuning with a low B, and I think I created this ambient piece that has been my most successful. Just playing with that tune. I can't remember how to play it now, but I know it starts with that chord. And as you can hear, it's all completely playable on the 6th string guitar. It's just a few things with the 7th string that you can do. You can have strings ringing that you wouldn't be able to have ringing if you had to sort of change, you know, where you're playing the notes. But the main reason that I like to play my 7th string guitar is that it's just a beautiful guitar, and because it's a jumbo size, it has really wide spacings, and I actually started on classical, so I was used to this kind of wider fretboard, and certainly when I play fingerstyle I enjoy this wider fretboard. It's more like the classical thing. I feel it gives me more space to be more precise. You know, electric guitars, you have these kind of skinny necks, and they're great for what they're great for, but I actually prefer my 7th string guitar to my 6th string guitar, even though they're made by the same maker. The measurements are very slightly different, so that's why. So I guess in conclusion, I would say, if you've got ideas about why you really want a 7th string and how you can use it, then by all means get a 7th string. But a lot of the time you can do what you need to do on a 6th string guitar. Another thing that kind of opened up the 7th string guitar for me was just to use the bass string as a drone string, and obviously for my ambient stuff that's going to work very easily, and you can just ignore the 7th string, except just, you know, have it ringing, having that low B ringing. And it saves you kind of paying a cellist to stand there and play footballs, as they call them. Sort of long, endless notes. So I think that's all I've got to say about the 7th string. And I'll see you next time.